After traveling more than 4,000 miles and nearly reaching the Pacific Ocean, the exhausted Lewis and Clark expedition were stopped by torrential rains and fierce winds. Forced to find refuge, they picked a small cove or a niche. In between steep cliffs and the pounding waves, the Corps of Discovery spent 6 days in what William Clark described as the most disagreeable time I have experienced. In his journal, Clark wrote,
"It would be distressing to a feeling person to see our situation at this time. All wet and cold with our bedding, etc. also wet, in a cove scarcely large enough to contain us."
Clark's parting words were,
About 3 o'clock the wind lulled and the river became calm. I had the canoes loaded in great haste and set out from this dismal niche where we have been confined for 6 days past.
From then on, the stopping point along Lewis and Clark's historical journey would be known as Dismal Nitch. Today, Dismal Nitch is commemorated at a rest area along a busy highway. Tourists can read an interpretive sign about Lewis and Clark's time at Dismal Nitch. However, the actual location is now believed to be about a half-mile upriver, visible from the rest area. Jim Sayce explores the shoreline, searching for the real Dismal Nitch. Using the physical descriptions of the land from Clark's journal, he tries to match them to what he sees today.
So then I got to asking myself the question, so it was terrible weather. Is there terrible weather here? And I came down here in the worst possible storm you could possibly believe. And I stood at the base of the cliff and heard the small stones falling down and watched the waves crash against the rocks, knowing that this isn't an exposed point. It's a brutal place to be in horrible weather. And then after that, I started asking myself other questions. Where is the small holler? Where is the small, tiny little valley or miniature canyon? And so I walked up the drainage of the creek, and lo and behold, I found a small holler. And the hair literally stood up on the back of my head because I realized there was a sequence of features in the landscape for which the journal was talking about. And that is what really gets me excited, is understanding the physical nature of place that the expedition went through and feeling that on the ground, and it made perfect sense to me.
Jim searches for other physical traces of the expedition.
I even came out here one day at a low tide and I looked for all of the rocks that they might have gathered to weigh down their 5 dugout canoes. I figured, well, the rocks could still be around. They were immense parcels of stones. Why wouldn't they be around 200 years later, stacked up in linear shapes along the shoreline? And I'm still looking for those because I suspect they might be here.
Jim hasn't found any rock piles, but he believes he has found the correct location. The area has steep cliffs and a small stream.
When you combine hard features of the landscape, these streams, niches, rocks, cliff faces, areas where during terrible rains, little stones were tumbling down on them, there can only be one place that describes that place. Dismal Nitch. To understand the river from a Chinook's point of view, or to understand the river from the Lewis and Clark expedition, you have to get on the water. You have to literally get down on the water in a low boat like a canoe. By driving along the river in a car, you'd never get that feeling. And when you're on the water, so low to the water, you feel like you're in the throat of the river sometime, ready to be swallowed, because the river can change. Tides, wind, it can present you with horrifically dangerous situations in just a matter of minutes.
The area Jim believes is the real Dismal Nitch is a close fit with the descriptions in the journal, but the land along the shore has changed radically in the past 200 years. The faces of the cliffs described in the journals were blasted away to make room for Highway 401, and much of Dismal Nitch has been filled in.
For the general public, knowing the basic area is fine. But for other individuals, they want to understand where the expedition members were because they think there's some transference of the essence of exploration, that by going to that location, they can relive the experience and get a sense of what it was like 200 years ago.
The exact location of Dismal Nitch may never be conclusively proven, but for Jim, the connection to history has already been made.